For decades, scientists wondered when humans first reached the Americas. This question cut to the core of human origins on this continent and remained one of the most debated mysteries in archaeology. Textbooks taught a clean, simple story that seemed settled for nearly a century. This model, known as Clovis first, claimed that humans crossed a land bridge from Siberia into Alaska around 13,000 years ago. They supposedly followed an ice-free corridor between massive glaciers and spread south quickly. The evidence for this was the Clovis culture, defined by distinctive stone spear points found across North America. No one knew the true answer because the evidence was scattered and often contradictory. The mystery remained open, leaving a gap in our understanding of how and when people survived the brutal Ice Age landscape to settle a new world. Now, new evidence has settled this question. We now have the complete picture, and the decades-long mystery is finally solved. To understand how we reached this closure, we must look at how the old model failed. For 80 years, any discovery older than 13,000 years was dismissed as a mistake or a measurement error. Scientists relied on a rigid timeline that ignored genetic hints and uncomfortable archaeological dates. However, the pattern began to shift as new sites emerged that did not fit the Clovis mold. In 1997, a site in Monteverde, Chile, was confirmed to be 14,500 years old. This was 1,500 years before the ice-free corridor even opened. It proved that humans were already at the southern tip of South America, while the north was still blocked by ice. This discovery created a massive gap in the timeline that needed to be filled. If people were in Chile by 14,500 years ago, they must have arrived in North America much earlier. The investigation moved to the Pacific Northwest. At a site called Cooper's Ferry in Idaho, archaeologists found stone tools and charcoal from ancient hearths. They used radiocarbon dating, which measures the decay of carbon-14 isotopes to determine the age of organic material, to analyze the samples. The results showed the site was 16,000 years old. This was another piece of the puzzle. It suggested that the first Americans did not walk through the center of the continent between glaciers. Instead, they likely followed the coastline in boats, moving south along the Kelp Highway. This route provided plenty of food from the ocean and was clear of ice while the interior was still frozen. These findings pushed the date back, but they were only the beginning of the reveal. The case for an even earlier arrival grew stronger with the discovery of butchered animal bones. In Texas, at the Galt site, researchers found stone blades beneath the layers associated with the Clovis culture. This is called stratigraphy, a method where scientists study the layers of Earth to determine the sequence of events. Older material is always at the bottom, while newer material is at the top. The tools at Galt were found in a layer dated to 16,700 years ago. Not far away, at the Friedkin site, similar tools appeared in even older soil. These discoveries showed a clear pattern of long-term occupation. People were not just passing through, they were living, hunting, and making tools across the continent thousands of years before the traditional timeline began. But the real mystery was whether humans arrived even earlier, during the peak of the Ice Age. Genetics provided a vital clue. Genetic analysis, which maps ancestry by comparing DNA sequences, showed that the ancestors of Native Americans became isolated from Siberian populations around 23,000 to 25,000 years ago. This is known as the Beringian standstill. During this time, a population of perhaps 10,000 people, roughly the size of a small town, lived on the land bridge between Asia and America. They were trapped there by massive ice sheets. This genetic evidence suggested that humans were poised to enter the Americas at the height of the last glacial maximum. This was 23,000 years ago, a time when woolly mammoths roamed and sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are today. Despite the genetic data, the archaeological community demanded a smoking gun. They needed physical proof of human presence from that specific window of time. For years, the search yielded only possibilities and maybes. Some researchers found mammoth bones in Canada that appeared to have butcher marks dating to 24,000 years ago. Others found what looked like stone tools in a cave in Mexico. However, skeptics argued that natural processes, like rocks falling or animals gnawing, could mimic human activity. The field entered a period of tension where the data from DNA did not match the data from the dirt. The timeline was fragmented, and the closure the scientific community craved remained elusive. The breakthrough finally came from an unexpected source in the desert of New Mexico. In White Sands National Park, a vast gypsum desert stretches across what was once the bed of Lake Otero. During the last ice age, between 26,000 and 19,000 years ago, this basin held shallow freshwater lakes surrounded by wetlands. In 2009, researchers from the National Park Service noticed unusual impressions eroding out of the ground after heavy storms. They were human footprints preserved in ancient mud. Unlike stone tools, which can be moved by floods, or bones, which can be carried by scavengers, footprints are primary evidence. They represent a single moment in time where a human stood in a specific spot. You cannot argue with a footprint. Excavations at White Sands revealed something even more significant. The footprints were not just on the surface. They were stacked vertically through multiple layers of sediment. It was like a book where every page showed human activity. To determine the age of these prints, scientists turned to radiocarbon dating of seeds found within the footprint layers. These were the seeds of Rupia serosa, an aquatic plant commonly called ditch grass. Because the seeds were embedded directly in the tracks, dating them would provide the exact age of the people who made the prints. When the first results came back, they were stunning. The seeds were between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. This discovery was the moment the timeline finally made sense. It proved humans were in the heart of North America at the height of the Ice Age, 10,000 years earlier than the Clovis theory allowed. However, the scientific process requires rigorous verification. Critics raised a valid concern known as the hard water effect. They argued that aquatic plants like ditch grass can absorb old carbon from the water, which makes them appear thousands of years older than they actually are. If the seeds were contaminated by old carbon, the dates would be wrong. This created a new mystery. Were the dates real, or were they a chemical illusion? The case was not yet closed. To settle the debate, scientists returned to the site to find independent lines of evidence. They needed to prove the dates using different materials and different methods. First, they extracted thousands of grains of conifer pollen from the same sediment layers as the footprints. Pollen is made by land plants, so it does not suffer from the hard water effect. It takes its carbon directly from the atmosphere, making it a highly reliable material for radiocarbon dating. Second, they used a technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL. This method measures when sunlight last hit a grain of quartz sand. It acts like a clock that starts ticking the moment a grain is buried. If the pollen, the sand, and the seeds all gave the same date, the evidence would be ironclad. The results from the second round of testing provided the definitive proof. The pollen was dated to the same 23,000-year window as the seeds. The OSL dating confirmed that the layers of sand were buried between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. 3 independent labs verified these identical results. The dates were not an error, they were a fact. This cross-verification completed the evidence hierarchy, moving the claim from a strong suggestion to a confirmed reality. The smoking gun was found. Humans were living in New Mexico, while massive glaciers still covered Canada. The old theory that the ice-free corridor was the only way south was officially debunked. This discovery connects separate findings into one coherent system. Now we know that humans did not wait for the ice to melt to enter the Americas. The timeline is now mapped with precision. 25,000 years ago, humans were isolated in Beringia. 23,000 years ago, they were already as far south as New Mexico. 16,000 years ago, they were established in Idaho and Oregon. By 14,500 years ago, they had reached the tip of South America. The pieces finally fit together. The mystery that puzzled scientists for nearly a century is answered. We have the complete chronology of human arrival in the New World. The methodology used at White Sands shows the rigor of modern archaeology. By using mass spectrometry to sequence the carbon isotopes and using multiple verification methods, the team removed any room for doubt. They published their final findings in the journal Science, and the data was peer-reviewed by independent experts who confirmed the accuracy of the dates. This is how we know the truth. It is not based on a single bone or a lucky find, but on a systematic analysis of the Earth itself. The process of verification is what turns a theory into a settled fact. This discovery also changes how we think about human resilience. To be in New Mexico 23,000 years ago, these people had to navigate a landscape dominated by giant ground sloths and mammoths. They survived the coldest period in recent Earth history. If the global temperature had dropped just a few more degrees, or if the available food sources had shifted slightly, these early pioneers might not have survived. Their success is a testament to human curiosity and adaptability. This is your origin story as a member of the human species. Your ancestors were part of this same expansion that eventually populated every corner of the globe. We now know that there were multiple waves of migration. The people who made the footprints at White Sands may have been part of an early group that did not leave a large genetic footprint in modern populations. Later groups, who arrived after the ice melted 15,000 years ago, contributed the majority of the DNA found in Native Americans today. This explains why archaeology and genetics sometimes seem to disagree. Archaeology captures the presence of people, while genetics captures the survival of lineages. Both are real, and they describe different layers of the same story. The case is now closed because we have reconciled these two types of evidence. Most people still think the Clovis culture was the first, but you now know the real story before it reaches the majority of textbooks. This discovery was only fully verified in the last few years. It represents the cutting edge of our knowledge about human history. The Clovis first model has been replaced by a much older and more complex reality. This shift in understanding is one of the most significant changes in the history of archaeology. It demonstrates that our species has a much longer and deeper history in the Americas than we ever imagined. The evidence proves definitively. Humans arrived at least 23,000 years ago. This is now confirmed by radiocarbon dating of seeds, radiocarbon dating of pollen, and luminescence dating of sand grains. The results are consistent across multiple labs and multiple methods. The debate is over. The question of when humans first reached the Americas is settled. The decades-long mystery is now solved at the deepest level the evidence allows. We no longer have to guess or speculate about the first Americans. We have the dates, we have the tracks, and we have the proof. The satisfaction of this closure comes from the completeness of the picture. We see the path from Siberia to the desert of New Mexico clearly. We see the methodology that proved it. We see the timeline that connects the ancient past to the present. The ambiguity that once surrounded this topic has been replaced by ironclad certainty. The layers of mud at White Sands act like a physical archive of our history, and we have finally learned how to read them. This is the final reveal in a century of searching. The synthesis of archaeology and genetics resolves the conflict that once plagued the field. The footprints are real. The genetics is also real. They are not contradictions. They are different perspectives on human migration. Archaeology tells us where people were, and genetics tells us who survived to become the ancestors of modern people. By combining these two fields, we have achieved a level of certainty that was impossible just a decade ago. The system is complete, and the gaps in the timeline have been filled. We now have the complete picture of the first Americans. They were pioneers who crossed a frozen world to find a new home. They left their mark in the mud of an ancient lake, and that mark survived for 23,000 years to tell us their story. The investigation that began with stone spear points in the 1930s has reached its conclusion in the gypsum dunes of New Mexico. The evidence has settled this. The case is airtight, and the question is answered. We now know exactly when the story began. There is no longer any room for doubt. The mystery of the first Americans is solved.